name is LoeyLane, and I'm so excited to tell you guys about my new podcast, Internet Urban Legends, with my BFF Snitchery.
We deep dive into the darkest corners of the internet to uncover whether some of the most notorious web myths are hoax or whether they're con. Internet Urban Legends, available exclusively on Spotify.
Hello, my loves. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. Hi, hello. My name is Loey, and after, oh my goodness, like so long, months, years at this point, I finally have a paranormal story time of my own to share with you guys, all about the house that I moved into when I came back to live in Los Angeles. This video has been such a long time coming. I have wanted to make it for a super long time, but the experiences kind of just kept building on top of themselves. I realized as I was talking earlier about how it's been a really long time since I've told you guys a paranormal story. My last one was when I stayed in this really cute but very haunted tree house when I still lived in Georgia. That night, weirdly enough, and it wasn't something I said in the video because at the time I didn't know how sure and how serious it all was, but that night was the night that I decided to move back to Los Angeles, and I applied for my first house here. The one that I manifested and my friends were manifesting for me, but that I didn't get. Lo and behold, this house is exactly what I wanted out of that house, but better. Like exact same amount of rooms, very similarly laid out, similar in the sense that I have a home and a guest home, so I can kind of divide up my work and life balance. A yard for my dogs. I'm in the best neighborhood. It has a lot of character and history. I could go on forever. But I find it really interesting that the last time that I came to talk to you guys about a paranormal experience, it was when I had just decided to basically move to this house, but I didn't know it yet. Aside from that experience, which I very kind of unwillingly and naively walked into, I have not ghost hunted, really done anything in the paranormal world aside from a few things here and there in a very long time, both due to kind of a lack of interest, but also COVID. I can't travel for the most part, and yeah, that's all there really is to that. So it's really exciting to be back with another paranormal story. Maybe not so exciting that this is not like a travel destination. This is like my home for the rest of my life. So we'll see how I feel by the end of talking about all this. I wanted to say really quickly that if I ever refer to the house with a she pronoun, I don't know why I do it. I don't know if it has a deeper meaning or if it's just that this house feels very feminine and motherly to me in a way I can't explain. My home is 100 years old. Nearly. We are coming up on that number, and it's everything I ever could have possibly dreamed of. Living in my favorite city, Los Angeles, in what is essentially the most beautiful little cottagey home in a city. Like, it is the perfect house for me, and it's always felt like weirdly maternal in a way. I don't know that I could explain that to you aside from just saying I think that the house has this overarching energy that I'm not necessarily going to be talking about today. Today I'm talking about ghosts that once resided in the house. At least I think so. But I think that the house kind of has a presence of its own. I posted on Instagram not that long ago when I hit 3 months of living here, which was in August, how it was almost like this reunion. Like when I walked through the doors, I was just like, oh, I'm home. And I never felt like that with the house, not even my dad's. I knew as soon as I walked in the door two different things. One, that this was my home, that I was so overwhelmed to be here. Literally, it was so dramatic. My friends Eleanor, Emma, and I had just driven across the country for me to move in. It was like May 4th, I want to say. I walked in the door, I literally fell to my knees and started sobbing hysterically because I've never felt more at peace or more at home somewhere. But I also immediately knew that this place had a lot of energy to it. And over my months of living here, I've really deciphered ghosts from just the energy of living in an old house. I feel like the road trip is sort of important to how everything began and why I sort of brushed off certain things in the beginning. Even though I knew the house was older, I certainly did not, as much as I'm interested in all of this, I still didn't want to think the house was haunted, you know? While on my road trip, my friends and I hit up some really fascinating places. We basically made the whole road trip a little bit longer than it needed to be so that we could stop in major cities, never sleep in the middle of nowhere overnight, but also so that I could visit some like kind of paranormal hotspots. So we stayed in New Orleans, we stayed in Dallas, we stayed in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then Sedona, Arizona, because it was near Jerome, Arizona, which is a ghost town. But I did not have any experiences that paralleled what I went through in New Orleans. I could do an entire video on that road trip. I took a lot of like random footage thinking always that I would do a video. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely let me know. But one of the scariest nights on the road trip was in New Orleans. We stayed in what I thought was kind of like an old hotel, but it turns out it had just been like a Hilton before it was like the hotel that it became. And even though it was not like the scariest destination in terms of outward appearance or its history, I had the worst sleep paralysis of my entire life in that bedroom. The worst nightmares, the worst sleep paralysis. I woke up and then that day something happened with my car. It was the first leg of our road trip and we had to stay an extra day basically in New Orleans, and I was like, we are not staying in that hotel another night. I literally cannot go back there. So when I got to the house and things felt a little off, or I felt a little bit like I was never really alone, I chalked it up to two things. One, that my friends who were staying with me, Eleanor and Emma, were staying like over a week after the trip just so we could all recoup. But also just like if I felt any residual energy, it was probably from my experience in New Orleans. So didn't think too much about it. At first, all of the paranormal experiences in the house would happen to people who stayed here without me or when I wasn't around. For example, I'm a mom to 3 beautiful kitty cats. 3 of those cats were from a litter that I rescued from underneath my brother's girlfriend's house like 2-ish years ago. While I was gone from Los Angeles over the course of 2020, they lived with their other foster mom, and they had never met the rest of my pets. So I'd never met my dogs, never met the rest of my cats. You get it. So I was keeping them in my 3rd guest room. I film in this guest room where what I'm about to tell you about happened. But they were staying in a 3rd bedroom that's not really used for that much right now. It's just storage, only while I was asleep. So I would have them out during the day when I was awake, but when I was asleep, I just didn't know how much I trusted the dogs around 3 new cats they had never met before. And I am sure a lot of you understand that. So every single night I was quadruple checking that they were in that room, they were safe and sound, they were good. One night after I had quadruple checked that room and made sure all of the Kit Kats were in, Emma, my friend who was staying in this room, woke up to find a beautiful furry black soot ball laying on her chest. Haunter had somehow gotten into this room overnight. The problem with that being that I made sure he was in the other room. There's no entry into this room unless the door opened and closed. So he would have had to have made it past 2 closed doors to get into this room. But there he was, and he was just purring on top of Emma. She wasn't too worried about it, but mentioned it in the morning how strange it was and how much like she was just like, how did he get in this room? He wasn't there when I went to bed. And it was weirder for me because I'm in my like peak pet mom life, making sure all of my animals are safe in this introductory period. So I don't know how he ever wound up in here. I have some bullet points just so I wouldn't forget to mention any specific thing, but one thing I forgot to put in here was how one night I caught them on camera like looking around the room at something. They kept staring at the ceiling, staring around the room, like they were very clearly following something, and I thought it was a bug. And I kept looking, I didn't see anything, but I was sure that they knew whatever it was. And then in this video, you can hear something like slam outside of my bedroom window right here, and all of the cats turn and look at it. That was just another random thing that happened, but not like in the timeline of how I'm gonna tell these events. The thing with Haunter and Emma happened, I mean, like into a week of me living here. So almost a month after I moved in, I went to go see my family finally. I have not seen my grandparents or my aunts or my cousins or anybody in well over a year. And this was when COVID was looking like it was kind of close to the end. Mask mandates were lifting, and so I went and I visited my family in Michigan. While I was gone, I had a dream that a man was walking through my house. And there wasn't anything like specific or weird about the dream except that there was just a man and he was in my house. I immediately texted my friend Grace, who was watching the house, as soon as I woke up, and I was like, I just had the weirdest dream. Like, I wanted to make sure everything was okay. again, she was staying in this room, like my made up guest room, also where I film. But you get it. That was when she texted back to let me know that she was actually about to call me because she woke up that morning, and when she woke up, she noticed that this bedroom door was wide open. And then she walked out, and every single door in the house, every last one, was wide open, as if somebody had just come through and opened them and then left. Like someone was walking through the house, just like the dream I had. So she said that there was no sign of a break-in, like the back and front doors were not open. But she said it was weird, like why were all of these doors open? It didn't really make any sense. It was something I put in the back of my mind and also just kind of blamed on one of my dogs. I'm also gonna blame that on one of the dogs. My big guy, Hades, he is like a 4-year-old, 60, 70 pound husky. He's a big dude. He's also just really tall and long. And I was just like, maybe he stood on his hind legs and maybe he opened the doors and that would be fine for the ones that are like the latch handles. But then I was like, how did he get into the ones with the twist handles? And I just tried not to think about it again, but that was that. And then when I came back from Michigan, I have been pretty much in this house ever since, aside from one other trip that I'll tell you about later. And I've noticed over the course of just my time living here that as things got sort of untidy, when I first moved in, of course, I was keeping everything clean. All I was doing was cleaning or working on the house or unpacking or anything. And as I've settled into regular life, it's gotten a little strange and a little hard to keep an entire house clean by myself. I've always lived with other people, so this is a really new experience. And I've noticed that kind of weird things will happen, specifically when I get the house a little bit less than perfectly tidy. Items of mine will just go missing for days. Think like my keys, think my purse, think my wallet, just things that I desperately need to have. An entire box of clothing that I was going to use for a video evaporated. I couldn't find it anywhere, and then the next day it was just back in my living room. And at first I was like, maybe I'm just like really forgetful, and I knew that I was just stressed from moving and living in the house by myself and all of this stuff, all of these big life changes that I was experiencing at the time. I have to say, it's kind of nice to be able to finally talk about this. I've never been as stressed out in my life as I was when I moved away from Georgia back in May. It was a really healthy change. I really needed to be away from my dad's house, especially with the 5th anniversary of his death coming up this month in October. But it was also really, really, really hard. I've never moved by myself. Making the conscious decision to leave my dad's house behind, knowing it's going to be renovated and rented out and all of this stuff. All of that was really difficult. At the time, I was actually getting a bald patch in the front of my head. That's actually why I cut bangs recently, so I could hide it. I was just pulling out my hair. I was crying every single night. I lost a lot of weight really fast, and then I gained a lot of weight really fast. And I've just sort of been in this weird like yo-yo of a lot of anxiety. And I'm adjusting and I feel a lot better now, but I want to say that the reason I brush off things like I can't find a box of clothes that should not be missing from my home was that I was so overwhelmed and so stressed out. But it wasn't just things going missing. I was getting a lot clumsier when the house was messy, like dropping things, breaking things, spilling things really easily. And I'm kind of a klutz in general, but I started to put 2 and 2 together that it was like, wow, it's always when my house is messy. Maybe it's like my surroundings affecting my brain. Maybe I'm just like not as coherent, who knows? However, this was when I had someone visit my house who's very spiritual, and they are very in tune with, you know, spirit and just that kind of stuff, the paranormal, whatever you want to call it. And pretty much immediately upon entering my home, they went really quiet, and they were just quiet and sitting in my living room for a bit. I left and got them a coffee, and when I came back into the living room, they told me that there was a man, a really masculine, kind of heavy presence that was in my home, and was specifically uncomfortable with them in particular visiting because they were a stranger. And once, I guess, this masculine spirit realized that they could see him, he told them to pass along 2 things. 1, to always keep my gates shut tight. So he asked specifically to keep the gates closed of the house, especially at night. And number 2 was to keep the house tidy. I hadn't shared any of the information about how I would feel like things would go missing when the house was a mess, or like how I would always drop, or whatever. I hadn't really put two and two together that it could be paranormal in any capacity. I just thought my surroundings were affecting my psyche, When your space is messy, you can be a little bit more forgetful or just clumsy, or I don't know. But then that spiritual friend said that, and I was just like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And that was pretty much all that he said to her. And then he just kind of excused himself, and we had a nice little coffee date in my living room. The only other thing that friend told me was that the man was a former resident. Didn't specify like what time period or anything like that. Like I said, the house is 100 years old, so there's a lot of wiggle room. But they also told me, ooh, my ears just started ringing. Anyway, they also told me that he was just protective of the house, and now me by association as a resident. So that made me feel a little bit less freaked out, especially hearing this big masculine presence is in my home living with me. This is literally a bachelorette pad, like no men allowed. So it made me a little bit less weirded out. Luckily, it didn't stay particularly freaky at all. And I don't think that this spirit means me any harm at all. I think that he's just really protective of the space, wants to keep it standing for as long as possible, and just wants me to keep it tidy, which is a totally understandable request from your living, breathing roommate. Like I said, I have not really left the house aside from one other trip where I went to San Francisco with Benefit and my best friend Eleanor back in August, I guess that would have been. I got really sick on this trip. Thank God it was not COVID. I tested negative every single day while I was both ill and after. I was getting tested pretty much every single day for 2 weeks. Honestly, it was very intense. But I had gotten this like bug, which is now sort of floating around the country. My mom got it. Anyway, and I had really overslept one day. I mean, I could not peel myself out of bed. I've talked really openly about my depression and mental health and how if it weren't for my pets, a lot of days I wouldn't get out of bed. But they are my major motivator in life. They are the reason that I wake up in the mornings. They are why I feel like I can do anything, honestly. Being responsible for another living creature does that to you. So I was really, really upset with myself when I realized just how much I'd overslept. My dog Riley is 10 or 11 this year, I'm not sure which. I rescued him several years ago, but he's an old guy. And so overnight, I have a big faux grass patch in the house that I put down at night so that I can make sure if he has to go to the bathroom, he doesn't do it on the rug or, doesn't try to hold it until morning because he's an older dog and I don't want him to be uncomfortable. So I knew the dogs would have a spot to go to the bathroom overnight. So when I woke up, I was just more upset than anything. I was just like, dang, like I'm mad at myself for sleeping in. Now they're getting their breakfast late and they're going outside late and our whole day is off basically. I come out of my bedroom into the living room and I look and see that the back door is wide open. And panic immediately sets in rather than anything else. I did not think this was paranormal at the time. I thought somebody had broken in. I grabbed a baseball bat. I called one of my friends and let them know I thought someone had broken in. The alarm system wasn't going off. Nothing looked awry. My television was still in place. Nothing was missing. But I'm walking through the house. Of course, nothing is there. Once I've cleared it completely, I then notice that somehow none of the cats had slipped outside, which is one of my biggest fears. I do have a fenced-in backyard, but I don't let my cats outside. And it was just like a massive miracle, basically, that they had not run away. And when I realized that, I was like, well, it couldn't have been open that long. Like, it can't have been open all morning. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I think it was this man who lives in the house who just wants to keep it clean, preventing my pets from having accidents because I was so sick I couldn't wake up. Because it doesn't make any other sense to me. My cats would have run for the hills and none of them escaped the house. Like somebody was keeping them inside, but also someone had let the dogs outside. So very, very weird. And again, just kind of put it in the back of my brain and was like, well, thank you, entity that lives here. I really appreciate that. That was very nice. Then one night it kind of all came to a head. All of these sort of smaller things have been happening. I knew that there was somebody here, but I had not really made any effort to communicate or had seen anyone or anything like that. But the energy in the house just felt really overwhelming one night in particular. And I'm going to talk really briefly about this, but I am a practicing witch, which is a new development in my life. Actually, I am making a video about how I practice and all of that kind of stuff for my members here on my channel. So if you want to watch that, it will be up. But I do some deity work, and I thought that that overwhelming energy was just my deities like, hey, talk to us, because I tend to neglect them or not listen to their advice sometimes. So that's all I thought it was, but still kept pushing it off. It kind of feels like when you're in trouble with a parent in a weird way. Like, I know I'm in trouble. I know that I need to do what I'm supposed to do, but I'm too scared to face the consequences. So was just ignoring it. And then the lights started flickering in my room, only my room, and actually only my salt lamp in my room, which is right next to my patron deity's kind of like altar space. And I was just like, crap, I have to talk to you, don't I? So I got out my pendulum and I decided to have a conversation. I lit his candle, all of that. And the energy of the pendulum was just really, really, really chaotic. Not that it wasn't giving straight answers. It was just like, I didn't know what to ask. I asked all the usual questions about like, was there something he wanted to tell me? Was there something I needed to know about? Was there a warning? Was there a message? Like, and it just didn't seem to make sense. So I asked, and I've never done this before, if I should use a device, if I should use a spirit box or something to communicate. And again, I've never done that with my deities before. And I kept getting a yes, like over and over and over again on the pendulum. Like it just kept swinging back and forth. I have one of those cool little boards and it kept saying yes. So I decided to use the Necrophonic app on my phone. I didn't feel up to doing a full spirit box session. The Necrophonic app is used by a lot of different people, but mostly I've seen Kelsey Davies using it recently. She has a haunted doll on TikTok called Lola. I've used it in the past, but I've always, I guess, just been sort of skeptical about it. Not sure how authentic like a cell phone app could be for paranormal communication, but this entire experience really solidified it for me. This app works by repeating things from a sound bank, and Spirit is supposed to use these sounds in the bank to create words. And for anyone who might ask, I didn't film this session of talking with Spirit. I never film my deity work. I don't even talk about the name of my deity, and I am very private about it. It feels like this very small, sacred part of my life that I keep away from the internet for the most part. So in no way was I going into it like, I'm gonna talk to the ghost who lives in my house. Like, I did not think that. So my deity begins to respond on the spirit box to questions that I'm asking. So I'm like, do we need to talk about something? Like, am I in trouble? Like, I didn't know what was going on. And he was just like, no. And then he said, I love you. And he also said, you're safe. And I was having like heart palpitations. I really thought something terrible was about to happen. Like, I was like, something horrible is about to happen. I'm gonna have a tower moment and everything's gonna come crashing down. And I thought he was just like, hey, listen, I'm with you. We're gonna get through this. But then as soon as that happened, a different voice came onto the Necrophonic app. The names that I received were Paul, Henry, Lucy, and John, just in a string, back to back. And I didn't know what that meant. Paul, Henry, Lucy, and John. I don't know anyone with those names. However, after that happened, somebody stepped forward, and it was a masculine spirit who talked in this, it's hard to explain, a very like monotone, single note kind of voice that I'd never heard come from this spirit box before. And he and I had a like 40-minute conversation in which he told me that he was Paul. He had lived here before. When I asked him, was he the man that my friend had seen when they were visiting? And was he the one saying, keep the gates closed and keep the house tidy? He did say, yes, that's him. I didn't ask like when he was alive or anything, but I did ask how old he was, and he said 40. And I kept getting the visual of fire, like over and over and over again in like my brain. I just kept seeing fire. At first I thought it was anxiety and me sort of, again, thinking everything's about to crash down around me. I don't know what's going on. I'm talking to this new person and everything feels very weird. And then he says on the spirit box, fire. So I immediately put it down. I run to the kitchen. I have like natural gas in my house. So I wanted to make sure all the gas was off and that I wasn't like in any danger. Go figure, no fire, nothing like that. And now I think that maybe it was just something that happened in the house that he experienced. Maybe he died in a fire. I really don't know. And didn't really ask for clarification because he had a lot to say and I very rarely could get a word in edgewise. So I come back and he said, you see over the spirit box. And I said, you see what? And he said, the kitchen, it's dark. And I was like, yeah, it's 9 o'clock at night. The kitchen is dark. He went on to say that he doesn't like and asked me to turn the lights on. He simply asked, lights on. And I said, like, at night? And he said, yes. And I was like, can I get a nightlight or something so I don't have to leave the actual lights on? And he said, no. This man really wants me to pay one hell of a power bill. But that night I did what he asked and I turned on the lights. And then he very strangely also asked me for a glass of milk. And I said, you mean like milk? Like you would like a glass of milk? And he said, yeah. And so I went to the kitchen and I poured him a shot glass of milk. And then I came back to the spirit box in my bedroom and he said, thank you. And I just let him know after that point. I was like, hey, listen, I can leave the lights on tonight, but we're gonna have to work something out. I got like these cool neon lights for the kitchen, like a sun and a cloud that I leave on at night for him, just so he's not stuck in the dark because he doesn't like to be in the dark. And I just told him, listen, I'm probably gonna live in this house for the rest of my life. I love this house so much. It is literally my home. I told him that he was welcome to make his requests known, but to please stop taking my things, and that I would in turn work my hardest to keep the house in tip-top shape so that it can stand for a really long time. All he said was okay. And that was it for that conversation. He went away and then it was just kind of garbled, like nothing made sense after that point. So I turned off the spirit box and I was just in awe that I had had such a clear conversation that was literally led in by my deity. It was very fascinating. I had expressed to my deity how much I wanted to connect with the house, how much I wanted to connect with the history, connect with the spirits that lived here, and how I wanted it to just be harmonious. Like I wanted it to be the most peaceful, beautiful place on earth. I don't want to feel like I'm in fight or flight mode, which is something that's been a really common theme in my life for years and years and years. So I think that that's why he kind of like introduced us and why he kept saying he needed to tell me something and then gave the floor over to Paul. Since then, two major things have happened. One night as I was doing my work on a full moon and I had the pendulum out, Paul started just jabbering again. And I didn't have much to ask, just if he had anything he wanted to say or if there was anything I could do for him, and the answer was pretty much no. And I just asked, like, why have you not moved on? Like, why have you not gone into the light? Like, why are you still here? He didn't say anything at the moment, but then that night I had a dream where I saw Paul like in the top hat and like a suit, very weirdly, very formal guy, just sitting in the kitchen. Like he had been just sitting there and watching the house. I think that he's just here to protect the home, that he really loves this place, and then by association that he'll protect whoever lives in it. Another really huge thing that happened was I had lost my wallet. I have this really cute little wallet on a string that I usually hang up by the door. I couldn't find it anywhere, like literally anywhere. I was running late. I needed my wallet because I didn't want to drive without a license. And at one point I closed my bedroom door kind of hard because I was really exasperated. I was really frustrated. And as I did so, my wallet fell off of a shelf that I had checked like 20 times before onto the ground right at my feet. And that just felt like a little like, here you go, you know, like, here's your thing. It felt like a kind of helping hand rather than something freaky or malicious. Other than that and the video of my cats that I showed you guys earlier, nothing has really happened since that conversation with Paul. He just feels like a protector of the house. I leave the lights on in the kitchen for him at night. I leave on the neon lights. I haven't given him milk since that first night that he asked, but he also hasn't really reached out. I did want to say that if he would be comfortable with it, I would definitely do a spirit box here on YouTube and film a conversation between us. But right now, the reason that that didn't happen was, again, because I don't film my work in witchcraft. I don't talk about like my religion as a whole, really, and it just wasn't something I was expecting. But that's the story of my haunted house with a very, very lovely ending. Also, I wanted to say that like none of this was my haunted dolls or anything like that. I do have 3 haunted dolls right now, 2 of which you guys have never met. I purchased both of them right before I moved, and they live in the guest house at the moment, and they're moving into the front house coming up here pretty soon. I really wanted to kind of establish my own boundaries in this house, get a little bit more zen before I brought them into what I felt was a really chaotic environment, because they're all like child spirits, and I didn't want like children living in a house where I was super, super stressed out and sobbing on the bathroom floor every single day. Like, let's just be real. So none of this was them. And I am excited to see how they kind of mesh in with the energy of the house. But that's my paranormal story. I really hope you guys enjoyed. It was fun to just sit down and chit chat about my own haunted house experiences. I wanted to say a special thank you to my subscriber Mickey, who is a member of this channel. If you want to join my channel memberships, my most recent members exclusive video was a video all about my witchcraft, my practice, and a lot more. If you want to check it out, you can become a channel member by clicking somewhere around this video on that little join button. We would love to have you. For now, thank you all so very much for watching. If you did enjoy, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you very, very much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!